10-second security tip. Go.
Hey, this is David Spark giving you your 10-second security tip, and that is to listen to security vendors. There may be a time you don't want to buy their product, but heck, you may run into a friend that is interested in your product. And just the education you get from a security vendor about how they are helping the security ecosystem will be of value to you and to others in the community. So if you can pass along some value to someone else, that helps all of us.
It's time to begin the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast, recorded in front of a live audience.
Oh my God, listen to that crowd. Ecstatic. I'm thrilled as well. Welcome, everybody, to the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast. My name is David Spark, and this is a very unique and unusual episode. This is a bonus episode of the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast. We are on the very last day, and I believe the very last session, of the Global CISO Virtual Executive Summit, hosted by Evanta. And this is the CISO Innovation Spotlight, and it is a podcast for just this event that actually happened yesterday, but we're following up on it to have sort of a deeper discussion, if you will. So what happened yesterday is 3 security companies with some unique products presented to a panel of CISOs. And those 3 companies are Kasada, Access Security, and Order. And we're going to hear from all 3 of them today. And the CISOs who asked a few questions then, but they're going to ask more questions now as well, so you can hear. So we're going to bring each one of the vendors or representative from each one of the vendors on one at a time. They'll chat for a few minutes with our 2 CISOs, who I'm going to introduce in just a second. And then at the end, the CISOs will make a determination of which one they liked the best, what they didn't like, what they did like, what they have hopes for, what would work, what wouldn't work. All right. Everyone understand that? Let me introduce our 2 CISOs. The first is Matt Crouse, who's the CISO of Taco Bell. Matt, make some noise so those people only listening can identify your name with your voice.
Hey, David, thanks for having me today. And thank you, Chris and the Evanta crew, as well as our vendor partners. Really looking forward to it.
Excellent. And also joining us is Lara Divi, who is the CISO for Dine Brands Global. Lara, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey guys, Lara Divi. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for having me. It's glad to be here and seeing all of you guys and looking forward to our session and conversation.
Awesome. All right. So here's my big question, and I kind of always ask this when we talk about innovation. In cybersecurity in particular, when someone says an innovative cybersecurity company, and I'll start with you, Lara, what is it you're looking for? What means innovation in cybersecurity to you?
Yeah, modernization of cybersecurity, looking for solutions that address not only today's, if you would have challenges, but the future challenges that we're going to have. Things that are coming down from, if you would have cyber threat actors that we haven't seen, potentially that is going to be a challenge in the future for us.
And Matt, what about you? What does that mean to you?
Not very different from Lara. I think it's a recognition that no current security technology or vendor is ever perfect, and looking for new ways to solve the challenges that current solutions and products kind of don't address in ways that help us.
And per like that opening tip I gave at the beginning of the show, how open are you to hearing about new solutions? And you know, because I see, you know, I talked about this with a past co-host of mine, Alan Alford, is that he realized that he needed to keep himself open to listening to pitches from a lot of security vendors, because if he's going to do a better job at security in his organization, he needs to know what's going on out there. And traditionally, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the 2 of you, when a CISO wants to look for a solution, they just go to other CISOs. And if other CISOs are just talking about the same products they're using and no one's going outside, then it just becomes a massive echo chamber of old solutions. Have you seen this happen, Matt?
I have seen it happen, and I think it's really important, and it was a great tip that you gave, because as a CISO, it's my job to understand my business's risk, their technology risks, and translate that to mitigation controls. But I only understand what's happening inside of my own business organization. the vendor partners in the community understand what the bad guys are doing now, where they're going next, and how that needs to be mitigated.
And Lara, what do you do in terms of keeping up and making yourself open to new solutions that are
Absolutely. It's always we have to keep up with new solutions and technologies, and we have to be ahead of the game, as we all know, and as you mentioned, that's the only way we're going to know what threats are out there and how we're solving the problems. So when it happens, we know who our trusted partners are and who are the vendors that we can go to and get help, and of course from our CISO partners.
Quick question per something I mentioned in the opening tip. Have either of you seen a solution, it wasn't right for you, but you knew a fellow CISO, oh, this would be right for that person? Have you passed that company on to that person? And not saying at the bottom, but pass the name on. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely done it. All right. So this is my big comment to all vendors out there. It's not always a one-to-one thing, like CISO hears it, then buys it. CISO hears it, could tell other CISO who could then buy it, or could then tell another CISO who could then buy it. So it's the sort of the ongoing education I think is critical. All right, let's bring on our very first guest. And what I'm going to ask is of all our first guests when they come on, just give a quick pitch of what their company does, so those people who were not part of who are listening right now, who are not part of the discussion yesterday, have a general idea. And then I want all of us to just sort of engage in a short conversation about the product. All right, so let us bring on Sam Crowther, who is the CEO and founder of Kasada. Sam, thanks for joining us.
Oh, mate, appreciate it, David.
Nice to see you as well. All right. Sam, just give it to us in 30 to 60 seconds. What is Kasada for those who don't know?
Easy. So we help organizations solve the problems that bad bots or malicious automation causes on websites, mobile apps, and APIs in a very, very simple and economical way.
And I want to stress that one thing. I'll start the conversation going right now, because one of the things that you brought up yesterday was, the percentage of traffic from bots that are coming to the site. You said 60%. By the way, I've heard 95 to 99% from others as well. But one of the things that maybe the security people are not paying attention, they may just be thinking about securing, let's get rid of it. But if you're physically taking in all this bot traffic, you're paying for all this bot traffic as well. And saying that this is a solution that will not only help in security issues, but help for economic reasons. And I really like that you brought up that issue as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's awesome when security tools can provide very, very tangible business ROI in areas that are kind of adjacent. And that's sort of an area that we found ourselves in, right? Where it's so easy for bots to contribute to such a large percentage of someone's Amazon bill, someone's, telecom bill, that, we can actually have a good impact there.
All right. So I'm going to throw this to both Matt and Lara. You heard the presentation yesterday. You had some questions, but please feel free to grill them and ask the questions that are on your minds and might be on the minds of your fellow CISOs as well. So, Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, I appreciated your presentation yesterday. One of the things that we talked about was how you put the onus on the client that's connecting to a website to prove that they are good and to constantly prove that they're good. What made you take that approach versus asking the question of, do we think this person is good or not?
It actually was from experience that I'd had being a part of building a fraud group for a bank. So I used to work for one of the investment banks as a security analyst, and then I just sort of did a few things. And the problem was we were always making decisions after the bad thing had happened. And, sure, you may be able to stop, in that case, funds going out the door, but it became very clear if you could actually stop it further upstream, like, there's no longer a need for any of, even a small percentage of the bad things happening, right? And one of the things that happened to us at this bank is the tighter we tuned, the retroactive decision making, the more people just scaled up their operations on the front, right? It's a numbers game, automation. So if they're only going to get 1 out of 100 requests through, they send 1 million. If they're only going to get 1 out of 1 million, they send 100 million. And so, that's sort of why we leaned into the approach that we took.
Lara, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. Hey, thank you so much for yesterday's presentation. It was awesome. One of the things I really liked about your product is you're focusing on bot management or bot automation, because technology innovation are using a lot of bots. So one of the questions I had, and this is hopefully for audience as well, how do you distinguish between false positives and false negatives? And I really like the idea of
Lara dropped out there.
Oh.
Lara, do it. Say, Lara, could you do me a favor?
Yes.
You started to say, I like the idea of, and then we lost you for a second.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Just do me a favor. Just repeat from the beginning your question.
Wait, can you guys hear me now?
I can hear you fine now,
oh,
but for some
sorry.
reason we had a weird blip. Go ahead.
Oh,
do it again.
Sorry. I really like the idea of focusing on bot management and automation aspect of, if you would have technology, because technology innovation, they're using a lot of bots in digital channels, if you would have. So how do you distinguish in your product false positives and false negatives? And I also like the idea of CAPTCHA, just kind of eliminating that from your product, because it does kind of business disruption and impact, if you would have, from a customer perspective.
Yeah, so on the false positive, false negative side, because they're two obviously very impactful things. If we start on the false positive piece, one of the reasons early on we made the decision to move away from, making classifications based on the human interactions, which leads to, I guess, problems of, classification later down the chain, is you get into that scenario, right, where, it's actually relatively easy nowadays to, I think there's a GitHub repo called Humanize, which will literally generate human movements for you. And like you're going to have a very, very good ML model to distinguish that. But we realized the tools that are being interacted with are very different. And so if we could actually move away from detecting interaction patterns to how does the tool behave at its like execution layer, right? Like how's the JavaScript executing within this browser context? Does it indicate any signs of automation? We could actually vastly reduce that false positive risk, because you're no longer playing a tuning game of what looks acceptably random and human versus what looks automated. And on the false negative side, by going down that route of actually detecting the tool itself versus the interaction pattern, it means that, someone could tomorrow go and create a new bot using the latest version of Puppeteer, right? But because they're actually using a framework that's not a legitimate browser because it is a hooked Chrome, it behaves differently to a normal Chrome at some very, very low levels in the way that, maybe returns some data in the DOM or even renders it. And so by looking for those differences, that's how we manage the false negative problem, at least, because someone has to actually really build an environment from scratch that mimics something legitimate.
So I'm going to throw a question to both Matt and Lara here. And obviously, Sam, I want you to speak up. But one of the things I have about innovative companies is the ease of implementation. And that there's a lot of factors that come in the ease of implementation. One of them can actually be cost. If it's really cheap, I can probably get this passed. But it also can be like what needs to physically move for this to go in. So from what you've heard, Matt, if you were to implement something like this or think something would be, where do you see how easy or not easy it would be? And I want to hear from your viewpoint, what you see so far.
For the ease of implementation, I think what you would have to, first of all, you'd have to make sure that it's going to play extremely seamlessly with whatever WAF technology you're using. I know we talked about that just a little bit during your presentation yesterday, Sam.
And let me just pause for the audience, and Sam, you can speak to this. Mention that it could be a WAF replacement or it could work in conjunction as well. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, and you can be a WAF replacement or not, and in some cases, companies like mine might choose not to go that route, but we may choose to go with a vendor who can do a really, really good job at something surgical like bot detection. So we have to talk about, do you integrate seamlessly? Can your operations integrate with their operations on the human side? And then what's the latency involved in something like that as well, the handoff between the two?
All right. And Lara, quickly, how would you think about implementation?
Absolutely. Scoping and integration and the impact on digital technology channels. And in the back end, the integration with WAF or replacement and CDN and all that good stuff. So it could be, there's some, if you would have medium impact into the environment.
All right. Sam, you get the final word here regarding integration or anything else you want. What's your last thought?
I mean, that's absolutely a good point, right? How many components of a system A does it touch and where does it integrate into? And that was why we chose the model we did, where it's designed to just receive traffic at any layer, behind a WAF, behind a CDN, to be as flexible as possible. Because again, when I was at the bank, it was terrible to get anything into the back end product.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's hear it again for our guest, Sam Crowther, who is the CEO and co-founder of Kasada.
Thank you, David.
Sam. All right. Let's bring on our next guest here. Sam, that was excellent, and we will be referring to everybody. This next person did not actually present yesterday, but I'm guessing he actually knows the product. We have a handoff from one to the other. It is Chris Hines, who's the VP of Product Marketing over at Access Security. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, we're thrilled to see you.
David, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. All right, Chris, let's just begin with, let's hear let's get the 60-second pitch from you as to what is Access Security.
Absolutely. I think if you think about over the last 2 years, the amount of data out there has increased by 100%. And now every user, device, and application is now connecting over the internet. The challenge is that network security was designed to protect people on the network, in the data center, people working within the office itself. With people working from anywhere and connected to applications that no longer reside in the data center, what's needed is this more secure means of connecting users to those applications. So what we do at Access is, our fundamental belief is that one day the exchange of information will always be fast, safe, and secure. So we sit in line between users and the business resources that they're trying to get access to, and we inspect that traffic, we verify access, and we broker connections on a specific basis without having to place users on our network, without having to expose the infrastructure to the open environment, where we see 500% year-over-year increase in ransomware threats because of things like VPNs and VDIs. Our goal is connect users to resources in a fast, secure manner. And that's what we believe that we've developed here with the organization. Now, this is something not just that employees will be able to leverage, but that businesses can actually use for their entire business ecosystem of suppliers, of customers, of partners, of vendors who need access to operational technology, for example. This is a connectivity company. And I think this is one of those kind of rare opportunities for security people to actually drive transformation versus being that kind of department of no. So very excited to be here.
All right, Greg, I just want to point out, editor, or Andrew, who's going to be the editor, you can take this out. It looks like Greg is back, and hopefully Greg has audio again, because he lost audio a second ago. My apologies for interrupting you there just for a second. So one of the big plays here was to be in the sort of a solution in the zero trust model. I'm going to throw this to you first, Lara. What did you think of what Access Security had to say yesterday, and what are some of your follow-up questions?
Like the product, and Chris, thank you for being with us today. As you said, it's connecting users to the resources in a secure, fast manner. And what I like is your product, the way I heard it, it can integrate with existing technologies such as Okta and endpoint security and so on and so forth. So it's very complementary, and it provides that holistic security and visibility that not only cybersecurity, but the business needs into the user's activity. So that said, one of the questions I have, and I'm going to ask what David asked earlier, what would you think the effort is to deploy your product, the ease of, if you would have the implementation? That was one thing that I was thinking about last night.
Sure, absolutely. One of the benefits of this, of being fully cloud hosted, is that we operate just like Netflix, just like Uber, just like Airbnb. Our customers pay a subscription, and we offer and we maintain the service up for them. So the only deployment aspect is there's an option where the customer could either go clientless or client. And what that means is they could either deploy something on their device, which would forward traffic up to the Active Cloud, or not. We can go, let's say you're a third-party vendor, you don't even have to deploy anything. Now, in either case, all we deploy is something called a connector. and it's a little runtime that runs within AWS, Azure, or the data center, and it front ends the application. It's actually the core component that's actually protecting the application from being exposed to the open internet. And the only thing that little connector talks with is the actual access cloud. So this idea of zero trust is very important in that it has to be easy to deploy, because that is a challenge for many companies out there. So cloud delivered, very light footprint within the customer's environment. Again, there's no appliances or anything like that. And to your point that you hit on before, we're trying to help security people go from 50 different point products down to maybe the 5 that matter, but being able to integrate with the endpoint, with the SIM, with the identity provider of choice are critical to being able to help you all move faster in securing this new modern workplace that we're all in today.
Awesome. All right. Let me throw this to Matt as well. And by the way, thanks for addressing the implementation question right up front. Matt, what are your questions?
Yeah, it was actually a perfect tee up to my question. It's almost as if Lara and I collaborated, but we didn't talk before and compare notes, I promise. One of the things that I really liked in the presentation yesterday that we got was that you guys provide very granular behavior and access control, right, for exposure to applications. So rather than plopping somebody into my network and they can see everything, whether they can log into an application or not, now they just can't even see it unless there's a validated reason that the company approves or what have you. My concern is, or my question, I guess, is how do you manage the maintenance of that list, and how do we prevent that from becoming a sprawl of spaghetti with connectors all over the place to every new application under the sun?
Totally agree with you. I think the biggest difference in everything is we're designed to connect users to applications versus networks. So in the past, what you would do is, if for network segmentation, for example, you'd have a whole list of firewall policies for all your internal firewalls, because you're looking at things on a layer 3 perspective. Source IP, destination IP. Making a simple change request took much longer than it probably needed to. First off, what we're doing is the way we do segmentation is on a per app level, and it's at layer 7. So although you will need to set new policies, those policies in terms of the amount are much, let's say, smaller in terms of the amount of. The other piece is we're investing heavily in APIs. So as new apps, let's say, discovered, or we have the ability to pull APIs from, let's say, CrowdStrike or the identity access management and automatically adapt policy in real time just through those APIs. The third piece is we remain in line when a user has brokered a connection to an application, and we're inspecting that traffic. And if something malicious takes place or the context triggers an alert, we sever that connection as well. So we're trying to automate as much as we can. And look, we see a lot of companies investing in DevOps. We're not quite there yet, but what we're finding is that a lot of people are really behind this notion of API. Being able to make policies easy to use and simple to use is extremely important. And we think that looking at things at an app level versus network level is a huge part of that simplification in the market.
Excellent point. All right. Simplification seems like a big deal with your product right here, given the sort of the volume of what you're dealing with, and a great point that you brought up here. All right, we have time for just a couple of more quick questions. Lara, what more do you have to follow up on this? What would it get you to want this, or do you see something like this working in your environment, or what kind of environment?
Absolutely. So getting rid of VPN, that modernization of cybersecurity, when we allow our people to work from anywhere, if you would have, any place, as long as their devices are secure and they're connecting to us, most definitely, I'm really interested. One thing that we talked about yesterday is privileged access, if you would have, Chris. And for the sake of audience, if you could also help us understand, how would this work for privileged access management?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things to look at it. What this technology allows the admins to do is define very granular policies per application. So those policies are customized to the organization. They take a couple of things into consideration. The specific application you're attempting to access, the user group. So for example, if you're using an Okta or an Azure Active Directory, we'll pull in those insights to determine, okay, Lara can get access to SAP, but perhaps Matt cannot get access to SAP given that he's coming from a specific group. The next iteration of that is actually beyond just what we're doing for kind of user access, but more so admin level RBAC, so role-based access controls as well. So when you think about privileged access management, it's from two layers. It's the end users who the IT admin is looking to secure access for, but as well as the admins themselves, because you don't want to have overprivileged access for your admins, where maybe some only need read-only mode, but they're going in and have full visibility into maybe full visibility mode, which could be, an insider threat or potential issue as well for insider malicious movement.
All right, and last
hopefully
question
that answers
to
your
you.
question.
I'm sorry. Hopefully it did. Last question to you, Mr. Matt Crouse.
Yeah, thank you. I just wonder, Chris, how do you see this space evolving over the next couple of years? You know, we talked, our last guest talked a little bit about automation of technology within his space. How do you see your product and the space in general evolving from maybe this person should be able to access the application because I said so to this person should still be able to access the application because we still know we can trust them?
Yes, Matt, that's a great point. And I think even what we're thinking beyond that is, what if the entity is not even a user? What if it's an app trying to talk to another app, or a server trying to talk to another server? Now, the important thing for us is we look at connectivity as any entity trying to get access to information. We focused on this notion of what we call zero trust network access, which really was remote access to private applications, because many of the customers said that for the next 18 months, they're going to spend on zero trust. The first thing is going to be lead TNA, then there's going to be CASB and DLP. So we purposely focus on the core, like foundational building block. And as we look to evolve our platform, we'll be adding in capabilities like CASB and DLP, which will be part of our SWIG. And even beyond security, because now we're at this kind of precipice of networking and security having to work more closely together. Since we sit in line, we'll also be able to provide visibility to the digital experience of every user, hop by hop metrics. You know, if Lara's trying to get access to Microsoft 365 from her Mac laptop, all the points she went from her Mac to the router, to the ISP, to access, and everything beyond that, we'll be able to pinpoint where the issues are and help IT solve those issues much more quickly. And that's just the nature of being in line, being a cloud service, on top of those policies and granular access controls that we talked about before. So the industry for us, start with this notion of private apps, then we'll have to continue down to all apps, open internet, where 98% of internet threats stem from the open internet, and being able to think and apply that to server-to-server traffic and app-to-app server traffic as well, especially as a lot of these companies start adopting more hybrid cloud environments where those entities have nothing to do with users overall. But it's the same notion, right? Identity and policy define what gets access, and we will help broker those connections in the right way.
Excellent. Oh, wait. Ooh, that's a halftime buzzer that came a little too late, actually. Thank you very, very much, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. The crowd appreciates you coming. We do. All right, let's bring on our very last guest here. That would be Greg Murphy, who's the CEO of Order. Greg, there you go. Good to see you as well. All right, Greg, I loved your presentation yesterday. You were in a space of discoverability, but a little bit more than just that, which is what I think makes your story very intriguing. So why don't you give us your sort of 30, 60-second pitch for those people who don't know who you are, because, again, many of the listeners here were not at your presentation yesterday.
Sure. Thank you so much. Order, we're the leader in what we call agentless connected device security. So enterprises today can have anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions of connected devices that can range for everything from traditional IT infrastructure to IoT devices like IoT-enabled toilet paper dispensers, surgical robots in the hospital environment. Our job is to make sure that enterprises know exactly what those devices are and that they understand how those devices behave and what they do on the network. And then we use that information to automate actions to secure those devices, all without requiring software agents, so that the net result is that enterprises can detect and they can respond to faster to incidents like ransomware, but they can also take proactive measures to minimize the blast radius and mitigate the impact whenever attacks do occur.
Sounds like it's addressing a lot of major concerns. And Matt, what was your first take on this? And I would say, let me start. I'm going to start with a slight negative here. What would be your concern of a solution like this?
My concern of a solution like this is always the false positive, right? Because you're writing on my network, you're interacting with my switch or my APs over an API, and you're allowed to take enforcement action on certain devices if they violate policy or what have you. My concern is always about the replacement devices, the break-fix things, and then false positives that may automatically, mistakenly block a device off the network. How do you approach that?
Good question.
It is a great question, and I think that one of the things when you think about the kind of Christmas tree of lights of alerts that go off in front of SOC analysts and the false positives, One of the ways you really address that is by making sure that you understand the behavior, of these devices. So it's not just, hey, there's a device that's on your network that looks concerning or that has vulnerabilities, but we can actually pair that with information to say, that device has a vulnerability and it is starting to behave in a way that no device like it has ever behaved before. It's doing something different than that device type typically does. That's probably something that your SOC analyst, your team needs to know about. So it's by pairing that understanding of what the device is, what its vulnerabilities have, with the behaviors that you're really able to help organizations prioritize and get to the highest priority incidents and respond to those, as fast as humanly possible, or as fast as possible with machines these days.
All right, Lara, let me throw this to you. What are your questions about this, and what intrigued you about it?
Yeah, Greg, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation yesterday. Really liked the product about if you would have endpoint detection and response, if you would have, and mitigation. My question is the baselining, as Matt said, baselining if you would have the platform and integration with different systems and having the Christmas lights, if you would have lighting up, and now we're chasing after false positives. What is the impact of deployment of a tool like this within an environment that is, if you would have, yes, we have asset management system, we have endpoint prevention and detection. How would that integrate with these existing systems?
Sure, it's a great question. We're going to integrate with existing things like your CMDB, your asset database, with your existing network infrastructure, with your SIM, your firewalls. But in terms of the key here is really making it simple. So we would install a sensor, a hardware sensor or a virtual machine on the network off of a span or a tap, and basically start watching the traffic on the network. We do this all passively. So basically you install the sensor, go off to lunch, and we're going to come back and we're going to give you a report of here are all of the devices that we see communicating on the network. And you made the point about baselining these devices. One of the things that's really interesting when you look at a lot of the devices that are agentless, think of IoT devices, printers, they behave in constant ways. Like a video surveillance camera doesn't wake up tomorrow morning suddenly deciding that it's going to communicate to different destinations on your network than it ever did before. So once we have that baseline understanding of what the device is and what its communications patterns look like, we can really hone in very quickly to identify what normal behaviors look like and then to flag things that look anomalous, where you start to see devices behaving different from that baseline. And so that whole process, identification of devices is something that usually takes place within just hours. Building the baseline is over a period of days, just passively watching the traffic. And then from that point on, you have the information about devices, their identity and their behaviors, and that enables you to start talking about intelligent policies to protect those devices.
Matt, what do you like about this discoverability solution, or essentially asset management solution, which is a little bit more than just that, than others you may have seen?
What I really liked about this solution in yesterday's presentation was, and we had a discussion about it toward the end, the ability for you to function not only as an access control mechanism for devices on my network, but also an EDR solution, and you can help me get to patient zero if I do find myself infected, because then I can go out and interrogate what patient zero did wrong and fix that problem systemically.
Yeah, and let me throw this lastly to you. Well, I'll also have you comment in here as well, Greg. But same with you. What do you like, and what would make you eager to jump on a solution like Order? What would make you a little hesitant to do something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. What Greg mentioned yesterday that I really liked is the devices that are connecting to the network that now my team has to go chase. Well, what is this device that's making a noise? Is it false positive? Is it false negative? Yeah, we're seeing perhaps some potential malware activities. With the Order platform, we can easily, if you would have identified. What kind of concerns me is that integration piece and really getting buy-in, because this has to integrate with IT systems. It's not only a security systems, but it takes that cross-functional efforts to get a tool like this deployed. If it was only cybersecurity, it would be easy. And for a distributed network, that would kind of take a little bit of time to, again, get this platform deployed.
All right. And Greg, your final thoughts on this, and any last sort of pitch you would like to make to our judges?
Yeah, I think that to respond to Matt's comment, I think one of the things that's really interesting is organizations that having that ability to look back when they find out about an incident. For example, one of our customers, in the midst of the SolarGate issue, said, we're lucky. We don't have any SolarWinds servers in our network environment. And we were able to go back and say, well, it's funny, you've got a server that is actually communicating with the SolarGate site. And they were able to look back and say, oh, you know what? What happened here is we had one of our groups had a POV version of SolarWinds that we never knew about. But thank you for alerting us to that, because we were able to now to see that device was there. Now we can take actions to take it off the network. So having that kind of time machine that allows you to go back and say, wait a minute, we found out about a new attack. Hey, have we ever seen any behaviors like that on our network? That's a very, very powerful tool. And I agree with Lara, that the point is this has to be integrated into existing systems. And it's, organizations have thousands of control points on their network. They've got intelligent firewalls, intelligent switching infrastructure. The goal is not to replace all of that, but to integrate seamlessly. The problem with those systems today is that they're trying to find human beings to write the policies is incredibly time consuming. By automating that process, we enable organizations actually to move towards this zero trust future.
Thank you so much, Greg. We were going to say goodbye to Greg. Goodbye, Greg. Thank you very much. All right, now with just a few minutes left, I'd love to hear your thoughts, both Matt and Lara, to the three companies that we saw today. I actually thought all were very impressive. What did you like? What didn't you like? Please feel free to speak openly, Matt.
One thing that I liked is all three of these partners they're not solving new challenges. There's nothing new about access or IoT or bot detection, but they're all solving it in new ways. Everybody, yes, is rushing towards zero trust because we all agree that philosophically is the right approach. We need to constantly prove our validity, prove our worth or whatever. But they're all solving it very technically in new and innovative ways. And I really appreciate that, because having been around the space for some time, one thing that we all know is that if you're not constantly innovating, you're falling behind. And I'm not calling anybody out, but I love to see new companies innovating in new ways.
And yes, and apropos that they are here part of the innovation spotlight. Lara, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally agreeing with Matt. Nicely said, Matt. They are looking at if you would have challenges that we have in new ways, and they are thinking ahead of time. How do we ensure that the companies not only are protected, how they are solving if you would have business challenges, remote workforce, if you would have ransomware, zero trust that will also address the human factor if you would have. So I really like all three products. It's just a matter of which priorities do we have, which challenge or issues we're trying to solve. And I really appreciate all three, if you would have, representatives from all the three companies. They did a fantastic job. All
right. Now I'm going to ask you which one was your favorite. We agree. They all did impressive. And I would want to know, and the favorite could be a whole mess of things like they seem a little bit more ready for prime time, easier to deploy. This is a need personally that I have that's really hurting right now. I'd want it. Explain which one is your favorite and why.
You want me to go?
I'll go with you, Matt, first.
Okay. I'll go from the approach of problems that I see, not just personally, but across industry and talking to all of my CISO peers. Of the three, we had bot detection, we had remote access, and we had connected devices. I think the most common problem that I see, and maybe it's because I operate in the retail space, is bots. And so I really do I liked Kasada's approach to stopping bots, but I also liked that they're very flexible and they can solve multiple challenges. We talked about them being a WAF replacement or not a WAF replacement. That kind of flexibility is very, very important. And I think that they probably solve the broadest set of problems, or they solve the problem that I see as the most common.
All right. Okay, so bot issues, and it is a pretty darn common problem. All right. Lara, which one did you like the best?
I really like all three, but I like access the most. because of the priorities and initiatives that I have, to go passwordless if you would have the zero trust, integrated apps, monitoring end-to-end session, which there are times that HR asks, hey, I want to know when a person logged in, and we're like, hey, we're cybersecurity. We're not monitoring people's, productivity or activity. However, I see other business use cases for the platform as well. So I go with Access.
Access security. All right. Now, I know many people say, oh, you're all winners, but literally this is the first time I can actually say you are all winners, and here's why. Matt, you chose Sam Crowther's company, Kasada, for their solution to dealing with bot technology that's going on. Lara, you chose Chris Hines with Access Security, essentially connectivity issues. And our audience has chosen Greg Murphy with Order for their solution. So I can honest to God say all three of you are winners. Congrats. All right. I'm going to bring absolutely everybody back on as we whoops. What is it? Here we go. Oh, I want to bring everybody back on. Whoops. Let me do that again for my editor. I want to bring everybody back on again as well and thank them all for participating here in the Innovation Spotlight as part of the Evanta event as well. One of the questions I ask, by the way, all my guests, no matter what, is, are you hiring? So I want everyone to tell me if they're hiring or not. And second, just make a final pitch for your company and how they can find out more about their product as well. We're going to just go in order, and then I'll let our CISOs close the show out. First, you, Sam.
Yes, we are absolutely hiring. We have almost doubled this year and are planning to do so next year, going to sort of 150 odd mark. Kasada.io is the best place to find out everything you need to know about us, and our blog section, which we have some pretty unbelievably smart folk on our team who write some pretty interesting pieces.
And for those of you listening, it's Kasada, spelled Kasada.io. Sam Crowther, CEO and founder. All right, let's go to Chris Hines, who is a VP of Marketing Security over at Access Security. Are you hiring?
We absolutely are. So thank you for everyone in the audience. We have some very ambitious goals to take out some much larger companies like Zscaler, like Cisco, so we're hiring quick. You can find us at accesssecurity.com, and we'd be happy to speak with you. And you can connect with any of us on LinkedIn. Just search Access Security, LinkedIn, connect with us.
Oh, and accesssecurity.com/careers for jobs. All right, let me throw this to Greg Murphy, CEO of over at Order, spelled, by the way, ORDR. Let me just ask, you weren't able to afford the E's, were you?
We couldn't. We just couldn't quite swing it. But now as the business has grown, we may be able to get that E in place.
Get that E back into the company. All right.
That's right.
Greg, are you hiring?
Yes, absolutely. We are hiring. David, we'd love to have you run our company Zoom meetings. You obviously know how to deal with mute issues. So we are absolutely hiring across the world, been growing. We just have a report of the organization, and if anyone is interested, love to have you talk to us. You can find information about the company at ordr.net. ORDR.net. So we have an IO, we have a .com, and we have a .net. All right, Matt. Thank you so much for coming. Any last thoughts as we close this out?
Thank you, David, for having me. I'm actually going to give Lara a shout out here. I think she won with the quote of the day when she said, if this was just cybersecurity, this would be easy. The one thing that I love about all three of these presentations today was that you help us solve business challenges. You're not just a pure play cybersecurity vendor. You're flexible, you're adaptable, and you can actually help my organization succeed, which I love. So thank you all very much for that.
Awesome, Matt. And Lara, your last comment.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. It's a great opportunity to meet with all three vendors here. Hear your, if you would have thoughts on cyber threats, how you're solving it. I'm just glad to be here and mingle with you all. Thank you, David.
You are very welcome. And as always, I have to thank Evanta for putting on this darn event, for being a great supporter of the CISO series, and our audience. We greatly appreciate your contributions and for listening to the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast.